All right, welcome back to the Gateway Defense Podcast. I'm your host, Brennan Brennick. With me, as always, is my co-host, Justin Anderson. We run a company called Gateway Defense, and we travel the country teaching folks what we know about shooting, as well as working together to produce high-quality YouTube content revolving around the topic of performance shooting. In today's episode, we're going to be diving into the topic of low-light shooting, and joining us in the discussion today is Bryan Veliz of Slytac Training. Bryan, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. It's good to finally jump on this. I know we've been talking about doing either like an Instagram live or a podcast or something like that for quite a while. So I'm glad we can get you on the Gateway podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys actually started a podcast, which is pretty cool, right? Especially for you guys. So I'm super happy for y'all.
Yeah, we're stoked about it. So a lot of people know, and a lot of people probably will watch this on YouTube, but we have a YouTube channel where we're making videos. And for Justin and I, this is probably like the easiest way to up our posting schedule because filming a full on YouTube video, like 40 minutes or something like that, 30 minutes, it takes a lot of work, a lot of driving, a lot of shooting, a lot of filming and editing. And podcasts are easy. We get to have conversations with cool people, and hopefully it's valuable for people. So we like doing these for sure. And
then, are you guys in the same state?
Yeah, we are. Okay,
so which is awesome.
But we're still like 2 hours, 2.5 hours from each other.
2.5. Yeah.
That ain't nothing, bro. What are you talking about?
You live in Texas. Texas is a big state.
Yeah. Like, how far do you have to drive for a match or whatever? Like, 3-4 hours. It's just Texas time. You know what I mean? That's just Texas.
I like it. Yeah. There's some parts of the country for matches, people are like, oh yeah, I'd like to make it to that match, but it's like 40 minutes away. And I'm like,
my closest match is 40 minutes.
Yeah.
I think my closest match is maybe an hour and a half. So yeah. Okay, so let's without any kind of further ado, let's get into the topic of the day. Before we do that, Bryan, so one thing that we like to do is just kind of make sure these don't turn into interview shows, right? Nothing against interview shows, but there's a lot of really good ones out there already. What we want to do is have discussions that Justin and I are probably already having together, but bringing in somebody who knows what they're talking about, a subject matter expert. In our opinion, resumes don't really matter. It's all about what you're putting out and what you're doing right now. But sometimes resumes do matter a little bit, right? And so maybe just give people an idea, just quick elevator pitch, who you are, what you do, and maybe how your experience can relate to the topic at hand.
Yeah, man. So let me delete my whole story that I was about to tell you. But so super short and simple. I've been a cop since 2012. Most of my experience has been on patrol. So did a lot of stuff on patrol, part-time SWAT team, nothing too crazy there. And then took a whole bunch of training like you guys did, right? I spent all my overtime money on training. So took a lot of classes, really fell in love with shooting, teaching. And then really experienced a whole bunch on the training side of the house because my department wasn't offering training, right? So I had to invest in myself and really pay for my ammo, my gear, everything that I've done, I've invested in myself. So fell in love with training and shooting, like I said, and really just started to dive in on a whole bunch of different things within training, low light, vehicle work, injured shooter, just your performance stuff, right? So I caught the bug like you guys did, right? And I remember, Justin, you talked about the Magpul DVDs at one point. Same similar thing. I saw those DVDs and I was like, all right, let's start putting in for classes. And so that's what I did. And I never looked back, man. So that's where I'm at. I'm still taking classes. I'm shooting matches pretty aggressively this year. That's the plan. But yeah, that's my background in a nutshell.
That's very cool. My first introduction to you was back in like 2018, 2019 timeframe. You came out to North Carolina to the range out there. I think Nick and Aaron hosted you, or Mark, yes. Mark and Aaron. Maybe
Mark
Nick wasn't there. Yeah, Mark
Nick wasn't there. Yeah, but it was Mark and Aaron. Yeah,
he was too good for that. But yeah, I remember that. So that was one of the first classes I ever took, actually, believe it or not. and that was before you were with Centrifuge. And so it's cool to see you kind of back doing your thing again. And yeah, hopefully we can share the range again at some point. I would love to jump back in one of your classes and shoot a little bit with you. But so you do a lot of low light classes, right? I mean, kind of, would you say that's kind of your niche, or do you feel like that's just part of what you like to teach?
That's one of my favorite subjects to teach. So I would say it's definitely my niche, if I will. Like, I kind of get like put in the low light corner, but I mean, I love it, so I'm okay with it. So I teach a lot of low light classes, a lot of different variations of that, whether it's just a low light intro class, maybe it's a little bit more of quote unquote advanced, and where we're including medical work with low light, which is, I don't think we did that in your class. That was a 1 day handgun and 1 day rifle. So that's kind of the intro class, if you will, even though it may not have felt like it during that class. But then, the quote unquote advanced classes include medical work on day 2, because it's a bulk load of what we're seeing within officer involved shootings, guys needing to apply medical work either to themselves or to somebody else in a low light setting. And there's no training like that. That is not that I've really come across. There's a couple of classes here and there, but it's a very neglected subject, right? So try to teach that pretty well. And then the low light instructor. And I think that's really about it as far as my low light classes that I have. Yeah,
that's a really good point. I never see low light medical classes being talked about ever. That's actually, and to be honest, I haven't even totally thought about it until now. That's actually super applicable.
Yeah, it is, especially because, again, guys, my background is patrol based, right? So law enforcement. So there's a lot of data and stats that's out there that you can pull from LEOCA, from UCR, from different private entities that are doing research, right? So that helps us for sure, right? Because data does help to drive training, and it kind of shows us what we're neglecting, what we're missing, what we can work on. And then there's one big percentage where we know that, hey, guys have a high percentage of being in officer-involved shooting during a low-light setting, so we need to rep that out. But then also there's another high percentage of guys being potentially injured, right, during an OIS, just because of the nature of that, right? Most engagements are generally close distance. They're generally not 25, 50 yards away. Now, that does happen for sure, right? But generally they're close distance. So the closer I am towards that threat, right, the luckier they have to be. They don't even have to have sights on target, right? Just point the gun in my general direction and send hate, right? So we see guys getting tagged at night, right? So those two subjects on their own are pretty, those two skill sets can be pretty difficult for some, but now combining them together is something that people don't even train or just haven't even thought of, right? So yeah.
It's almost like the tactical version of you guys know Mason Lane, right? USPSA competitor, super talented guy. So he talks about a lot like layers of difficulty in your training, where you're adding this, that, and the other thing. So maybe you're starting with static shooting, and you're starting on open targets, and then you're adding no shoot partials, and you're adding shooting on the move in different positions and things like that. It almost kind of reminds me of that, right? Everybody can stand and shoot. Everybody can flip on a weapon mounted light. Everybody can use a handheld light. But then you start layering these layers of difficulty. Okay, make it dark, right? Take one hand out of it. Now, do medical. Most people can apply a tourniquet, right? But now you have to do it in the dark. And so I think that's a good, that's good stuff to explore for sure. Because you don't want guys trying to figure that out the day it matters, right? You want them to figure that out before.
Exactly right. We're trying to build a surplus of skill. That's all we're trying to do, right? So just build a various amount of skills so we can stack on. And then if it does happen to you, right, and maybe you're not injured, maybe you're just applying medical to somebody else. Like, hey, I've seen this before. I've kind of done it before, right? So I kind of have a plan versus like, I have no idea what I'm doing, right? And the med work is pretty, comprehensive. It's not just tourniquet work, which for the most part, when you look at LE engagements, that's kind of where guys are having the biggest hiccup, depending how much time is allocated to med work. My experience for med work was a 2-hour basic SABA class, right? Self-aid buddy aid. That was during the academy, and not to my department. They only have so much time, right? Like, so it is what it is, right? But hey, I only had 2 hours. Here's your tourniquet. Here's how to open up the package. here's kind of how to basically apply it, and that was it, right? So I never saw how to do chest seals. I never saw how to wound pack, injured shooter carries, whether I'm injured or somebody else is injured. Like, how do I do that? The basic like TECC protocols, if you will, that like most guys should know. Didn't experience any of that until I took outside training and started to work on that on my own, right? So
that's crazy.
Yeah, exactly, right? So imagine like the department's like, hey man, like, you're gonna do great, right? Like, you're gonna be able to figure this out. But that's just not how it works, right? So the med work is tourniquets, it's wound packing, it's chest seals, it's carries, it's a whole bunch of different things with the lights on and then also with the lights off, right? So yeah.
That's really cool. That's kind of shocking. Not shocking, but it's surprising. Like, that's even less than a basic stop the bleed class. In a lot of ways, which is crazy. Cool. So let's get into kind of the topic of the day, just kind of surrounding some low light stuff. I think we can delve into a bunch of stuff with both like equipment, because that does matter. Equipment isn't everything, but it certainly makes the job easier. And then kind of some application stuff, some training stuff, maybe some stuff that you're kind of seeing come through your classes and things like that. First of all, let's just kind of touch on the importance, like why carry a weapon mounted light, right? We could talk about the application for cops. I think that's maybe a little bit easier to understand for some people, but I'd also like to touch on concealed carriers, right? Like, everybody's got like EDC, right? And some people kind of check out an EDC where like I carry a full-size gun, full-size weapon mounted light as my everyday carry every single day. Always have carried like a full-size, like a compact gun at the smallest. And then I've been carrying the full-size 5-inch for maybe 3 years. And I've always had a full-size like TLR1 or X300 or a Modlight weapon mounted light on there. And then in addition, a handheld, right? So we're seeing that kind of both of those things, obviously for the LE guys, and then also for the concealed carriers. So why do we need to be carrying lights, and why do we need to care about it in the first place?
Okay, so it comes down to, again, context, right? So LE guys versus concealed carrier, right? So we know there's a high percentage or high percentage of all-ball shooters during the low light, right? So which is 70% or higher. Sometimes it's 60, sometimes it's a little bit more. Just depends where guys are pulling their stats from. But generally, right, it's looking at 70% or higher of officer-involved shootings, right? So, and that varies. There are some guys that don't work nights at all. Okay, right? That just depends on seniority, where you are, etc. For me, my experience was we were on rotations for 2 months. So 2 months on days, 2 months on nights. So we'd flip-flop like that. There's guys that are on nights for 6 months. There's guys that are on nights like permanently on grays, right? Like they're living their best vampire life. Now, I don't know how they do it, right? So, and I have a lot of good buddies like that are doing that, and they're not divorced yet, right? And they're happily married. So I'm like, I don't know how you do it. Like, you never see your family and whatnot. Maybe that's a key to it. Who knows, right? So, so it all depends, right? But regardless, whether I was working daytime or low light, I always had 3 lights on me generally, right? So I had my weapon mounted light, Surefire, right, X300, and then follow the evolutions of that from the turbo and then Modlight, etc., right? So always have some type of weapon mounted light on, okay? And then I had 2 handheld lights. I had a working light or a fighting light, if you will, whatever you want to call it, and that was a handheld light that only had one mode, and that was it. So just a straight high mode, right? Like when I need light, I need all of it. Now I don't want to have to go through high, through medium, through low, through red, blue, SOS. Like if you're running that for work, please don't. Not as a working light or a fighting light, okay? And then I had a secondary light in the event that my primary light went down, or simply I just needed an admin light, so like my task light, right? So I have a working light or fighting light, and then I have a task light, right? So I have 2 of those. So my task light was, hey, if I'm doing a inventory search inside the vehicle, right? I'm just looking for something in the back of my unit, and I'm not trying to blind myself, if you will, inside or doing whatever I'm doing, right? So just something where I can go to low, right? That can still have the capability to go to medium to high. That's fine, but just something that could go from low to medium, etc. Right? So always had 3 lights on me. And the crazy part about it is I had the guys on day shift like, I don't need a handheld light or I don't need a weapon mounted light because I'm on day shift. I'm like, bro, like, yes, we're in Texas. We generally don't have like basements and so forth, right? But there are plenty of houses that have boarded up windows, right, that we go into, or just think about it from a different setting where, hey, I'm in a daylight setting, but I'm trying to broadcast light into a open structure door, right, where it's still kind of dark in there, right? So can I use a handheld light or weapon mounted light to broadcast from a daylight setting into a dark threshold to help me see a little bit, right? So it doesn't always have to be, don't always think of you're only going to carry a handheld light or weapon mounted light when it's completely dark outside or you're working night shift. It doesn't always work that way. And there's tons of videos showing that on YouTube, right? AKA photonic barriers, if you will. Yeah, right. So for my LE guys, I would definitely say you need at least one handheld light, and you definitely need a weapon mounted light, because it also comes to think about injured shooter, right? So if one of my hands is messed up, how am I going to hold a handheld light when I don't have use of that hand, right? Generally, we're not always completely operating where it's complete darkness, right? But I'd still like to have something versus nothing, right? So if I have a weapon mounted light, I can just turn that thing constant on, and then, hey, I have something versus nothing, right? When it comes down to like light on, light off, that's not a priority. A priority is working the gun, right? And just keep that thing on, constant on. It doesn't matter light on, light off at that moment, because you're already injured. You're fighting for your life. Like, why make it harder on yourself? Why make it harder on yourself, right? So there's no need to do that. Right. And then for my concealed carry guys, yeah, you have a less percentage chance of being involved in a shooting during low light conditions, but it can happen, right? And for the same reason why, even though, you know, all my lifetime that I've been carrying a gun, I still carry a handheld light and weapon mounted light, because, hey, who knows, mate? Maybe I just forgot to charge my light, right? Or just the batteries just died. Or I don't have use of the hand, right? Or I just want two good functioning hands on the handgun to run the weapon mounted light, right? So I'd rather have one, right, versus none, right? So the whole saying of two is one, right? So yeah, it comes down to that, for me at least, yeah.
So it's something that's important enough to where, like having a backup, because between a weapon mounted light and a handheld light, obviously we'll get into this a little bit more, like in the nuances. They have somewhat different applications, but there's crossover, and it's something. So you would say it's something important enough to have a backup.
Oh yeah, totally agree. Yeah, so cool. I always have some type of backup, right? So just like having extra batteries on the job, right? You can have extra batteries in your bag, right? But either on your belt or your backpack or your unit or something, having some extra batteries in case they die. It's always a good thing to do, right? So I'd rather have a backup or extra batteries to help me out in the case of the event that it does die or something happens to it. Yep,
for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. So kind of going down the rabbit hole a little bit, right? So you mentioned this a little bit, some of the features that you're looking for, especially in your handhelds. So let's separate the talk into handhelds and then weapon mounted lights. Let's say handhelds first. So handhelds, you said you've got one light that is your fighting light, right? It's all the lumens, all the candela, immediately, right? There's one mode, you push the button, you get all the lumens, right? And then you've got another one that potentially has a lower setting. Maybe it has some like admin modes or whatever. Maybe it's something that isn't potentially drawing as much power as maybe these big 18650s or something like that. Maybe it's got longer runtime, something like that. What are go into that a little bit and kind of help people figure out what you're looking for in each of those handhelds, and then we'll talk about weapon mounted lights as well.
Cool. So awesome question, because I love talking about handheld lights.
Yeah.
If I had to choose between what I want to carry, it'd be a handheld light over a weapon mounted light for sure. Like if I was limited on how much I could carry, and let's say I just didn't have a holster yet that would allow me to carry a weapon mounted light, for sure handheld light, because it's so versatile what you can do with it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's handheld light is I like to say is defensive in nature, but can also switch to offensive in nature. So defensive in nature, meaning, hey, the gun is not warranted to be out yet, but I can still use that handheld light to obviously search, navigate, do a whole bunch of different things, right, with the handheld light. And then if I need to go offensive with it, well, then obviously the gun's out for whatever reason, and then I can use various different handheld light techniques to help me PID, control, etc. Right? So you can switch on the fly with a handheld light from a defensive stance, if you will, to an offensive stance, right? So I've been running for years, or since they've been out. The Modlight. I have the PLH V2 head on here, right? So for those of you who don't know, like there was a generation PLH. Justin can probably talk better on this, right? But there was PLH that came out first, and then they had the OKW, right? And then essentially they had a baby, combine them together, right? So you get a good hotspot, good flood and spill. So you get kind of the best of both worlds. So I run the V2 on my handheld light. I have the V2 also on my Modlight for my handgun, and then I have the OKW on my rifle, if I'm not mistaken. But right, so size does kind of matter, but you'll notice that it's kind of the perfect size, right? A little 4-inch, 5-incher is just all you need. It'll get the job done. Okay,
that's all you need.
Notice that's not too big and that's not too small, right? So perfect there. And then if you want to run the I can always butcher it, Therium ring, right? Or if you want to do a custom setup, that's fine. But the biggest thing really is a tail capped activation, which most lights are tail capped. There are some lights that have a front activation. You see that more on some stream lights that are patrol based oriented. If you have that, not a problem. But the biggest thing is a tail cap, because this is going to allow me to hold the handheld light in a clinch grip, if you will, ice pick method, right? So this is a good position to be in. And then this tail cap allows it to be momentary or constant on. So it has both features. So I like to have a tail cap that does both. I had a couple handheld lights that only did momentary, which just wasn't my jam. Or you had to rotate the tail cap to lock it to constant on, which I didn't like either, because generally you don't have time to do that, right? From my experience, whether that's on a flat range or in real life, I generally don't have time to like sit there and turn it. Okay, so tail cap that does both, I'm cool with that. And then it's strictly high and high only, right? So there's no low, medium setting on this. I know Modlight is coming out with some new heads that are programmable, if I'm not correct, Jay.
Already out, actually.
Yeah, so they're already out, right? So if you're into that, cool, right? So you can save a load of money, just replace the head on, let's say if you have an extra body, and then you're good to go. But this is what I run on patrol. This is what I carry when I'm not on patrol. This is what I teach with. This is my go-to light that I've been using for a long time, right? And I have a couple extras, but yeah, this is what I do.
What's the white tape for? I'm just going to ask for the viewers. What's the white tape for?
So this is actually glow-in-the-dark tape. So during the day, it's obviously absorbing the sun. So at nighttime, right, you can see it. It's not as bright as it used to be because it's been on there a while. But the biggest thing, it gives me some contrast. So if I ever drop it at night, or if I'm teaching or whatever the case is, at least I have something to contrast. So I just put a little bit here. I'll see guys run a full strip around, right? Whether that's on the body or the head. I'll see guys paint their handheld lights orange, red, something visible so they can see it. It doesn't have to be black. Just because we're working in a low light environment doesn't mean we're going to be ninjas, and all my stuff like cannot be high vis. Like if I need my light and I drop it, like I'd like to be able to see it. Especially if, let's say, it shuts off and I cannot see it for whatever reason. Like I'd like to have some type of contrast, refraction.
You're breaking some hearts, Brian. Come on now.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's what I do. It's cheap. You can buy a roll of glow-in-the-dark tape, and you'll see this a lot on all my equipment, on my mags, on my Ear Pro, my weapon monolights on the bottom of the weapon monolight, right? Because here's the thing, like if a piece of gear falls, right, and it's at a class, like somebody's gonna pick it up and be like, "Oh, it's mine," and I'm like, "No, it's not, bro. Like that's mine because I know it has glow-in-the-dark tape on it."
Yep, Brennan, we've had many sessions at my range where we've dropped mags or shot timers or staplers or something, and it always gets lost until the next time we go out.
Yeah,
every time. Yeah. Like if you drop it, it's.
I'm usually driving home. I'm like, "Yo, Justin, I don't have a mag," and he's like, "All right, I'll look for it in the morning."
And then sometimes I don't find it.
Yeah, and then he doesn't buy mags.
I may or may not have a couple extra mags that were a little rusty. That
right.
you dropped your Modlight at the range one time. I can't remember what that was, before a match or something. You remember that? And it was super cold. It was totally frosted over. It was out there for like a week. or something.
Oh, dang, man.
It was, and it was still working, and the battery was I still had some charge in it and everything.
Yep.
But I have backup lights too. So, yeah, Bryan, the class 5 years ago or whatever it was, Bryan had us putting freaking glow in the dark tape on everything.
That's right, dude.
he was just standing there with a roll. He's just ripping pieces off. He's like, tape for you, tape for you. People were like putting it on everything. They're like, man. Freaking, oh my word. Like, oh.
It's funny you bring that up. I was talking to Max the other day, and he's like, dude, I still have like mud like in like deep in like somewhere in my mag carrier. He's like from that, because it was super, like, of course it rained that class, right?
Yeah,
it was super muddy out there, dude.
In the pit, dude. That was that good North Carolina red clay. That stuff was nasty. I had just gotten my gun stippled, and
I think you did,
just packed mud inside of that thing, and like I don't think the mud ever really came out. It was a good time. Raining and dark, and kind of chilly too, as I remember.
Yeah.
But
man, that sounds like a ton of fun.
Which is kind of the best time to do a low light, if you ask me. Like a little bit like chilly, a little bit of rain, okay, right? As long as it's not a tsunami. But I'd rather do that versus like low light when it's freaking hot outside and it's like 11 p.m. and it's still like 90 degrees. Like, come on, bro.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Although
and the bugs, all the mosquitoes.
Although I really don't like the rain. I don't like the rain. I think I'd rather take the heat. But okay, cool. So how about your admin light? What does that look like? What are you running for that? What are you looking for?
Admin light can be almost maybe the same size, a little bit smaller, right? But something that can still go from a low to a high. So I'll still run that. And then my admin light right now is a Surefire EDC2. I forgot the acronym, the number, right? So that's what I have right now, as a backup, right? So quick, easy, replace the battery. So that's what I have as a backup. But you can run anything you want, right? So you can run another Modlight. If you're already rocking a Surefire streamer, that's cool too. Just something that that you're gonna carry on you, and you're not gonna be like, I don't want to carry another light because it's bulkier than my fighting light or whatever it is, right? So carry something that's going to be able to, you can stow away in your pocket, maybe put on your plate carrier, depends, whatever setup you're running for patrol. If you're more concealed carry, I just generally carry one handheld light. I'm not carrying two handheld lights. I'm just risk versus reward. I can only carry so many things in my pockets as it is, and I'm not a big fan of wearing like a lot of pockets on my pants, right? So I run pretty slick setup, if you will. Wranglers, Vertex, something kind of low pro, if you will. You don't wear
cries just like every day.
No.
Shame.
Come on, man.
Shame, Bryan.
Come on. You're like really not giving the people what they want. Okay, so we're gonna have to discuss this offline. Yeah. Okay. So just kind of pretty much that one is can pretty much be whatever you want. It's not going to be the go-to. I need light now. Programmable, probably a little bit of a plus there, perhaps.
I know a lot of guys like stilettos. The stilettos are pretty good too as well. So
yeah. For sure. I know. Justin used to run a stiletto back in the day. Enjoyed that quite a bit. Yep, it's pretty awesome light. Justin, let's just get this out of the way because I know people will ask us as well. What do you run for lights and stuff?
Yeah, so I actually just started carrying. So I work for Modlight, for those of you who may not know that. So I'm a little biased, so take that for what it's worth. But Modlight is actually coming out with some new compact heads here. These were released at SHOT Show just recently. Not totally sure when these will come out. We're hoping for like Q2, Q3. But these little compact heads are pretty sweet on a little 18350 body right here. So this is actually something I just recently started carrying. It has a high and a high-low. I like that personally. You can program it to just be high. But for me, I use admin modes all the time because I don't want to pull up my phone or anything like that because I like to have a dedicated light that I can use for stuff like that. But I also don't need, 54,000 candela, 1,350 lumens just to look for my keys when I drop them, right? At the range or something. So you kind of do the old, finger diffuser type thing. And so Modlight just recently came out with some multi-mode heads, which is super convenient, something I really like and appreciate. So I'm carrying this as my handheld light, and then for a weapon mounted light, I am carrying a Streamlight TLR7. It's super compact. I carry it on a Smith & Wesson M&P 4-inch. So like I said, Modlight's coming out with a compact head and a compact PL350 body, but they're not out yet, so I'm not running that right now. But yeah, Streamlight TLR7 as a weapon light, and this is the PLH V2 compact head on an 18350 body.
Nice. But the weapon mounted light, the new one with a compact head, that'll still be pretty close to like a full size weapon mounted light. It's not going to be like the size of the TLR7 or anything like that, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah. It's still going to be, it's a little shorter than an X300, but it's still like a full size light. It's a little shorter than our standard, like PL350. This thing is pretty large. I could never carry this personally for concealed carry. IWB, I could never do it. But yeah, the compact light will be a little bit better for that, but it's still not anywhere close to like a TLR7 or anything like that.
So probably won't make a big difference for like Safariland bucket holsters, but it'll be a little bit more friendly for inside the waistband, digging into your thigh type deal. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, very much the same as you guys. I have played around with a bunch of different weapon model or handheld lights, just because I think they're cool. And there's been some pretty cool options that have come out on the market. The only one that I don't, the only company I think that I don't own a light from, a handheld light from is Cloud Defense. I have one of their rifle lights, but I've played with a lot of my buddies' MCHs. Go-to for me, yeah, Modlight PLH V2. I think this is hard to beat, Brian. Like you said, I think it has a perfect amount of spill versus hotspot. Like this thing still has a tremendous hotspot, as bright as I've ever needed for anything. Theorem switchback, also super easy to just grab this out of my pocket. I can get this out of my pocket about as fast as I can get my gun out of a holster. So it's just super convenient. I think that's a really good way to go. I like carrying the 18650 as well. I tend to use my light quite a bit, and I feel like I use up the battery pretty fast as it is. So I like the runtime. And then like you, Brian, I've got extra batteries all the time. So my EDC bag, my truck, it's always got 2 or 3 or 4 18650 batteries always charged, ready to go. And then I've got my charger sitting right here on the desk next to me. And I've pretty much always got a battery on the charger as well. So I think, yeah, good call on that. We're all kind of carrying something similar in the pocket. Yeah, I just carry one.
Like it's a testament of the product itself too, right? Like
100%.
A lot of guys carrying pretty much almost the same setup. So
100%. Close second for me is the EDC 2 Turbo from Surefire. So this is kind of a new light that I know they came out with a while ago, but I don't think they've started shipping for a minute. Andrew over at Surefire hooked me up with this a while back, so I was really happy to kind of get some time on this. This thing is actually a super phenomenal light, very comparable performance to the mod lights. I like this a lot. The only thing that is it's got the multi-mode as well with this thing, and I don't think you can program that out, so that's maybe the only negative potentially, but this thing is awesome. And it's got reverse pocket clip. I do like carrying a light that has a reverse pocket clip so I can stick it onto my hat. I've had to change tires in the dark and stuff like that, and it just beats like trying to hold a big mod light in your mouth. It doesn't really work too well. So
baby.
Yeah. So cool. kind of same thing. If I've only got to carry one light, I want it to be powerful for sure. I like that. Cool. So
little hack, by the way, before we move on,
go ahead.
If you're running any Theorem products, you can actually reverse the clip so that it is reverse clip. So then you can stick it on your hat like that. If you're ever,
mine's blown.
Yeah, so I don't know if you knew that or not, but you can just totally reverse it super easily. And
look at B up there. He's like, I had no idea.
He's like, whoa.
Listen, I don't really believe you though, because
he just showed it. What do you mean?
I feel like that'd be stupid. Then my clip is sticking out like this. All right.
Well, this is on the low profile EDC clip from Theorem. I believe I believe it still works on the switchback as well. It may not be quite as optimal, but Yeah.
Why is my light this way?
I really want to go try that now. I'm like, I need to
Listen,
go.
you just have to turn your hat around backwards, okay, man? Like it's not that hard. All right.
So pro tip on that too. Things you could carry that may help you out, right? Whether it's in the class or you're changing a flat tire or whatever. Carry a headlamp with you, right? Throw a headlamp in your bag. Have a headlamp in your training bag. So I run a headlamp all the time when I'm teaching, right? Or if I'm on patrol, I have it in my bag there. But so yeah, if I'm doing med work on somebody, right, I just put the headlamp on, or I wear it as a necklace. I just turn it on. I do whatever I'm doing, changing a flat tire, right? Headlamp, bro. It'll save you save you so much.
Headlamps are the move.
Headlamps are absolutely necessary just as a human being. Like you don't have to be a concealed carrier or like an instructor. You literally should own a headlamp. You should own 5 headlamps and just keep them everywhere because they are like the most utilitarian thing.
They're cheap, man. Earth. Like you can go to like Home Depot and buy you like a 2-pack for like, I don't know, $10 or something.
Yeah.
Like, It doesn't need to be like Princeton Tech or something fancy. Just something that's going to give you some lumens, right? Like it'll be fine.
Yeah. Even when I wear my helmet, right? Like night vision stuff, I've got that little side light or whatever, the Princeton Tech, and that thing's always on and off, like checking targets, loading mags, whatever it is, right? Because little admin lights are awesome. Okay, very cool. I imagine the criteria for looking for a good weapon mounted light are going to be very similar to your handheld fighting light, right? You want all the lumens right away, not really multi-mode on weapon mounted lights anyways. You said you're running now. So what weapon mounted light are you running on your pistol currently?
So I'm running both. I'm running the Modlight, right? The Gen 2s, and then I'm also running the Surefire Turbo. So I think they're both fantastic.
Super similar performance,
very similar performance, right? So they both, you can buy the Surefire rechargeable batteries, and then Modlight obviously is rechargeable, so you're fine there. Just depends what you kind of like a little bit more, right? Real on you, but very similar performance. The switch activation is a little bit obviously easier on the Modlight. On the Surefires, even when they're kind of been worn in, they're still stiff, which is cool. Some guys like that as well. So it just really depends on you, what you like. If you like more of a little bit stiffer activation on a Surefire, not that it's hard, right? And then the Modlight is easier, in my opinion, to activate. As far as like, there's a lot of just smooth motion in the activation versus the Surefire, but it all comes down to training and reps, in the end game there. So I run both. I'm a big fan of both. And just like with anything, I want a light that is just as capable for the platform. So if I'm running a handgun, obviously I'm going to run a handgun weapon mounted light. If I'm running a rifle, I'm going to run a rifle weapon mounted light. Depending on, again, how much space you have, if I'm running a 10.5 or if I'm running a 13.7, whatever, right? But I still would like a rifle weapon mounted light on a rifle. Now you can obviously change body sizes and heads and so forth, right? But I'm not a fan of running a handgun weapon mounted light on a rifle platform. So and then all I change on the Surefire is I change the switchology, right? The activations on the left and the right. I run the Filster arc switches, and I think I run the medium on both, if I'm not mistaken. And I do that because it gives me a little bit more contact, right? So when I'm activating the light, and then also for injured shooter aspects, if I ever needed to rock the light off of an environment, because let's say I don't have functioning use of this hand, right? And yeah, you can obviously activate with your index finger for sure. But sometimes we see guys slip into the trigger guard and ND into something or someone they don't want to do. So sometimes I'll just show guys, hey, how to activate a weapon mounted light by rocking off the environment. So that could be a tire, that could be a vehicle, that could be potentially another injured arm where I'm rocking that off of. It can be a whole bunch of different things. Just depends on the environment. So I'll run those on the Surefire because it gives me, again, a little bit more space to do that. On the Modlight, you're fine. You don't need to do that because they already have pretty good size switches for the Modlight. So
I think I've seen you run some like grip tape on your holster, like your Bryan holster as well. Yeah. So I'll get like a piece of skate tape, right? And go to Home Depot, just some aggressive tape on there, right?
and then I put like a good size on there on the side of it. Now it's dependent on policy and what guys can do. For me, I've always been a policy breaker, right? Because I'm like, it's my life, bro. You know what I mean? So I'll put it on the side of the holster, and it kind of acts as a scratch pad. So think of the weapon light as a why is it leaving my head right now? As a match, right? And so as I strike down on the grip tape off the side of the holster, that's a good like bite purchase off the switchology of the weapon light, and that'll activate 9 out of 10 times. If I don't put a skate tape on the side of it, and I'm running a slick holster, right, that's not Cordura wrapped, you'll see the activation maybe 5 out of 10 times, right? So it's a very smooth surface. But if I run the Cordura wrap or I put the skate tape there, it's going to give it a good bite, right? So it's just another option.
That, like right up here on the front corner type deal, or like on the side?
On the side, yeah. Some guys will do it off the top of the holster, which is fine, but it's a very kind of thin piece, right? So I'd rather use that flat, big surface, and just rock straight down and out aggressively, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, there
it's
you go.
Kind of cool. Yeah. I remember you talking about that in our class too, right? So that was something I'd never thought of. If you have Cordura wrap, does that generally give you enough grip?
That's generally like enough, yeah. And you feel like it's not enough, just throw a piece of skate tape on there. It's not going to be on there permanently. Sure. All right. Right. So just another option for you. Right. So maybe I can't do it with my index finger for whatever reason. Maybe I'm not running a GG switch, right? Some guys are a fan of GG switches, the Devgrew switch. Some guys aren't. I've tried a couple times to get used to it, but I've just never been a big fan of the GG switch. It just always felt weird to have the little nub kind of on the grip frame there, so I just never liked it. Guys are like, hey, but if I grip the gun, my light's gonna turn on, or my light's gonna get dirty. I'm like, bro, like take your battery out, right? Put something over the lens. Like there's such easy fixes for that. So that shouldn't be a problem of like not to run a GG switch, right? But for me, I just never could get used to the feel of it, so I just didn't run it. But a GG switch is great for injured shooter, for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
kind of a cheat code if you've only got one hand.
Yeah, exactly, right. So,
for sure.
And then rocking the Modlight off the holster is just an option. It's not the go-to option, but it's just an option, to give guys something different to think about or play around with in the event that they might want to do that. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, have the option available so you can pull it out if you need it. Right.
Yeah, and if you like it, cool. And if you're like, that's super gay, that's cool too. You know what I mean? Like, I'm cool about it, bro.
Yeah. Dude, that's what techniques are for, right? Like, that's where I think it's valuable to learn different techniques because it's a tool in the toolbox. Is it the end all be all? No. Like the principle is in that case, it's like get your light on, right? So you can see what you're trying to shoot. I think it's the same in any part of shooting, right? It's like, hey man, I've got to get my dot to be more stable on this target. Well, there's a lot of different things you can do to achieve that. What are you doing right now? Well, I'm moving and shooting. Okay, well, here's what you can do to settle your dot down. Maybe your dot's moving a lot on target. And well, what are you doing? Well, I'm standing still. Okay, well, that might be a completely different thing that we're going to do to try to get your dot to settle down. Maybe it's probably not a matter of lowering your weight or rolling your weight back onto your heels, right? If you're standing still, it's probably something going on with your grip or something else. So, techniques are always, they're an option to get you to accomplish the goal that you're trying to. And that's, I think that carries over whether it's defensive or tactical or competitive performance, whatever.
Yeah.
For sure.
And Bryan, I remember when you were on Mark Smith's JBS Training Group podcast recently, and I heard you guys talking about, so Mark says, he actuates, his handheld or his weapon on the light with his pointer finger. Yeah. And so then he was like, is that something you recommend? And you were like, no, not generally. But the thing is, the difference is that Mark is someone who trains. And so if you have someone who trains extensively, like maybe they can train to do that. But like from your side of things, like, teaching LE and seeing a lot of these OISs of maybe, officers ending or whatever, would you say that like how much someone trains can potentially be a determining factor of what kind of method they should use or can use?
Oh yeah, definitely, right? So, I mean, if you have unlimited time, unlimited resources, you can train anybody to do anything you want, right? For sure. Now, if we're limited on how much, again, time and resources that we can invest into our people, I mean, the sad truth, that's a reality, right? So, guys for low light are generally maybe getting about 4 hours every year if they're getting low light
Wow.
training.
That's not
So
very much.
not very much. So if they're not dry firing, if they're not taking low light training on their own, or just practicing on their own, and they're only getting 4 hours of low light training every year, or every other year, there's a good chance they're not going to perform how they think they're going to perform, right? And so forth, right? So I'm a big fan of activating the weapon Modlight with my support hand when I'm able to do that. If I have two functioning hands, generally my go-to, and even me, like I have a lot of experience, right? Still, my generally go-to is going to be activating with support hand, because all I'm trying to do is protect my legacy, protect the people that I'm training their legacy as well, right? To avoid potentially ending into someone, right, that they don't mean to do that, whether that's in a training environment or in a real life environment, because under stress, right, especially again, experience is a big thing for sure. But guys that don't have as much training time, experience, etc., right, under a startle response, and it even happens to experienced guys for sure as well, because I can show you videos of that happening to full-time SWAT team dudes, etc. And not that SWAT's like the end all be all, right? But just it shows you a different level of skill set versus a patrol based dude, right? So just a little bit different skill set. But it happens to everybody, right? So under some type of startle response, there's a good chance if I try to activate with my index finger, I may slip into the trigger guard, right, as I'm trying to activate the switchology. And it depends on, again, the switchology setup. Surefire is a little stiffer compared to a Modlight or a Streamlight, etc. You'll see guys slip, and then they'll ND, and then you'll immediately hear, "Oh fuck, oh shit." Sorry if I can't cuss, my bad.
No,
right,
you're
but
good.
you'll immediately hear that. So that tells you what
They messed up.
they didn't mean to do that, right? They were trying to
Yep.
activate their weapon model light, right? So,
Yep.
dude, if I can avoid that, like I'd like to, so I'm a big fan of activating with support hand, right? So you're either gonna rock up, right, a thumb down. It just depends on your light setup. That way, constant on, right? I'm not worried about momentary. I'm just turning that thing constant on, right? Establish a two-handed grip, do work, and then after that, I can worry about light on, light off, whatever I'm doing.
Yeah, I do the exact same. I see if I can get this on camera here. I do the exact same thing. I roll or activate with my thumb, support hand thumb, and then roll back with my pointer finger. I think Brennan, you do the same thing.
Exactly the same. Yeah. Yeah. Like you were saying, I think the light does make a big difference as well, right? Like I think that method, down with the thumb, knuckle up to go off, is like probably the easiest way to run the Surefire lights. But the Modlight, with the new improved switches, even the TLR ones, those switches are a lot lighter, and so it's a lot easier to activate maybe with your index finger. But like I have a very hard time reliably getting enough pressure to do that with my index finger. And then when I try to go off, I almost always push up, pass off, and back on. Right. So, I think it definitely matters what you're running, but that's exactly why you need to be training and putting in time with it. So, very cool.
And then what you'll see also with support hand momentary. So guys are doing support hand momentary, right? Is now they're worried about grip, sides trigger, but they're also worried about, hey, am I putting enough pressure inwards, especially on a Surefire, right? Am I putting enough pressure inwards to keep it momentary? And then generally they don't. And what you'll see is light on, light off, light on, light off, light on, light off, right? They'll do that unwanted strobe effect while they're shooting, especially during a high aggressive string of fire. Not that it's the end of the world, but I'm just kind of getting somewhat buffered information, right? Why make it harder than myself, especially if I've never been in the OIS, right? I'm like,
sure,
just turn that thing on, constant on if it's available, and then do work.
Sure. Yeah, 100%. I think that's a good thing that probably applies over to kind of the concealed carriers mission, if you will, right? Or situation that they might find themselves in. Like, I'm sorry, use case for weapon mounted light for let's say cops and concealed carriers in the States is a lot different maybe than like Delta operators in the Middle East for the last few years, right? So maybe they're doing something super offensive. They're on and off the lights all the time. I think for the most part from the data we're seeing, once a light comes on, there's really no reason for it to be on and off a whole bunch. Like, got to see something, the light comes on. I think you and I were having that conversation the other day. The light comes on, it stays on, finish the job that you started, and the lights will go off when we don't need them anymore, right?
Yeah, and just two different mission sets, right?
100%.
And from a performance standpoint, right? Like, you know, Brennan and I, we come from a concealed carry like performance standpoint or perspective. I personally have never, and Bryan, you already kind of touched on this, but I have never been able to complete even a string of like 5 or 6 rounds with Momentary without that strobe effect going on with that light. And like, I'm someone who trains a ton and I shoot a lot and I still am not able to achieve that. So you get someone that maybe doesn't train as much, like, and we can get into this a little bit later as far as like training and application, but you know, from a concealed carry standpoint, or maybe even an LE standpoint, drawing your gun and firing like a string of several rounds is quite common. And so being able to have that light constant on, and that way you can just 100% focus on your grip and being able to deliver accurate, you know, fire quickly. It's kind of what we want.
Yep.
It's the name of the game.
Yep. Right. So even same thing, I struggle with that too. Like, I've had the same experience you've had, right? And I shoot a lot too as well. So not a fan of trying to program that into guys that just aren't going to be training. Realistically, if I only get 4 hours, I'm going to use that time and those resources as best as I can to train them what they're going to do under human response, right? So yeah,
sure. So let's get into training a little bit. I think this is a good segue. So couple different training questions. So the first one I'm going to say for the guys who have a choice, and I think this is maybe specifically for like your CCW, right? A lot of people, it's funny, I've seen this debate kind of go back and forth quite a bit since I started carrying guns and shooting guns, weapon mounted light or not for concealed carry. And for when I started, it was like, I mean, I'll just say it, like Aaron Cowan was out there going, weapon mounted lights are mandatory, right? And so I was like, hell yeah, brother. So I put a weapon mounted light on every gun I had, and it was like, I'm never ever going to carry without it. It gets dark, right? For all the reasons we talked about, why it's valuable to have a light. And then I think handhelds got really popular and people started doing handheld flexes, and right. And there was, you know, fancy new lights coming out and people started ditching the weapon mounted lights. Right. And some really squared away people that I respected maybe at the time were saying, you know, definitely you don't need a concealed carry gun to have a weapon mounted light. You don't need these super powerful X300s or TLR1s, something like that. And then the smaller lights didn't have enough power to be useful at all, was the argument that I was getting. So just carry a powerful handheld light. Don't worry about the weapon mounted light at all for your concealed carry pistol. Because, you know, you're not clearing houses, you're not going into these, you know, types of environments where you're really going to need that. And then of course the stat would get thrown out. Well, what are the, you know, how often do we see these civilian involved shootings, or defensive uses of the handgun in a low light environment where they're employing a weapon mounted light? And the stats are, very, very low. So
yeah.
What do you kind of say towards that? I mean, I have my own opinions. Obviously you saw my carry gun. It's got a light on it. Justin's gun has a light on it, and we both carry handhelds. I think all three of us, that's kind of the EDC, or for you, off duty carry setup. What do you say to those people who are kind of like, well, it's just the comfort's not there, so I'm just going to carry handheld? Are there any training considerations that we've got to take if we're going to go that route, etc.?
Yeah, so there's kind of a lot that goes into that. So let me tell you real quick what I carry, so in case anybody cares. So I've carried a Glock 17. So I've carried a Glock 17 that used to be a Roland Special, right? So I had various different comps on there, right? With a Surefire or Modlight, right? Modlight wasn't out at the time yet, so Surefire, but various different comps, right? So I carried that thing. Right now, took off the barrel, so it's just my standard Glock 17 with a Surefire turbo, right? I carry a Walther PDP as well, the 4.5 with a Surefire turbo, and then I also carry a 2011 Staccato P with a Modlight on there, right? So for me, like, it doesn't, like, I'm comfortable carrying big guns, so like it's not an issue for me. So it's going to come down to, obviously, for my concealed carry guys, having a good belt setup for sure, having a good holster that can help support you do that for sure as well. I carry 2 holsters right now. I carry one from LAS, and then also carry a tier 1 MSP. I think I forgot the exact model number, right? So the MSP one, right? So
yeah.
Shout out to my other Asian brother over there. Right, so I carry those. Yeah, so I carry those, and then handheld light, and then always have a weapon model light on me. I don't carry anything without a weapon model light. Not because I don't want to. It's just because I'm so used to carrying weapon model lights on all my guns from patrol base, right? Mentality. I've always had that on there. So like, it'd be super weird to not carry a weapon model light, right? So that's kind of my experience on that. But really, man, like, just like what people say, like, carry what you want to carry. Like, if you want a full size gun, or if you want a 4.5 or a compact, like, whatever you want to carry, 2011, you want to carry a Glock, cool.
Right.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, if I had to choose one, it'd be a handheld light for sure. But if you can carry both, like, why not? Like, you may be a little bit uncomfortable, right, initially, especially if it's new to you, but you'll get comfortable, and you also build in a redundancy or fail safe in case your handheld light dies, or in case your weapon mounted light dies. Well, shit, at least I have one light versus no light, and yeah, the likelihood of you needing a weapon mounted light stateside concealed carry is very low, right? But I'd hate to fall in the percentage of like, hey, that was me, like, where I needed it and I didn't have it, right?
You mean I can't use my iPhone light?
Yeah, exactly. Light? Right. So
you don't want to be that stat, man. Like,
I'm gonna make this popular now.
Oh man. I mean, God forbid, right? God forbid it's you and you're with your family, or you're not with your family, right? But like, man, you know what I mean? It just depends on you, bro. So I would carry both. That's my thing. But if you had to only carry one, handheld light for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. My philosophy is very much the same. I don't think you're wrong if you don't carry a light on your gun. But I do think that the downside to it, like maybe a little bit of comfort, is it's a small price to pay. If you do need that weapon mounted light one day. I know my capabilities being able to shoot with a proper two-handed grip. I also know my capabilities with single hand, or just like a compromised grip, right? Yeah, I would much rather shoot with both hands on the gun in a proper grip if I can, and have that weapon mounted light doing its job, than having to manage, a handheld and a single hand on the gun, for sure. Yeah. With the training thing, I think one thing that I see a lot that I try to do a good job of not just being a dick and calling people out all the time. But these guys that carry that even advocate against weapon mounted lights, I see them doing a lot of training at the range with two hands on the gun, right? And I don't see a lot of single hand training. I'm not saying that like you have to train for a night shoot, right? Especially just as like a concealed carrier. But I do think you need to be like majorly squared away with your single hand shooting and know exactly what you can and cannot do with one hand, and then also navigating that weapon light in your offhand in some way, getting the light on target, getting the gun on target, getting effective rounds on target. That is something that I think takes a fair amount of practice. I mean, Justin, at matches, you and I see the single hand stages. Probably the most amount of mics thrown on any stage is any stage that involves single hand shooting, right?
Yep.
I mean, even with big, heavy, open 2011s, right? Like, they don't move. People still throw mics because they never shoot with just one hand. I think that will also need to kind of inform your training a little bit if that's kind of your go-to. Like, yeah, no light on the gun for me. Cool, like that's fine. Just make sure you're training with the setup that you do have.
Oh yeah, right. So especially when it comes to patrol based, you'll see the most common law enforcement engagement to date is a handheld light, right? So a handheld light, handgun around a vehicle, right? So that's kind of our most common stateside law enforcement engagement to date. Handheld light, handgun around a vehicle, just because by the nature of our work, right? Generally, traffic enforcement, maybe we're proactive, right? We're in a proactive unit and so forth. Generally, we're not approaching cars to do a traffic stop with a handgun already out. Generally, we're not like, hey, like, show me your license. Like, no, that's generally not how it goes, right? So it generally starts in a handheld light position, and then it evolves into, hey, getting the handgun out. So what I start with is generally what I end with. So what you'll see is a lot of guys start with a handheld light, and they generally end the gunfight, right, with a handheld light in their hand and a handgun. Now, there's some times where guys eventually do drop the handheld light, but that takes time for them to process, like, hey, I have a handheld light. I need to drop this and then go to 2 hands on the gun, activate my weapon mounted light if I have a weapon mounted light. Believe it or not, there are still some departments that are not issuing weapon mounted lights. Crazy, I know,
That's
right?
crazy to me.
But for the really, it comes down to liability, because somebody in that department, right, did something that they weren't supposed to do with that weapon mounted light, directing traffic. They ND'd into somebody, right, or something, right? So they're like, the department was like, hey, man, like, no, we're just gonna can the whole department from issuing weapon mounted lights. So the only guys who get them are like specialized units like SWAT or whoever, right? But my basic patrol guys, like, nah, we ain't about it. So I'm like, come on, man. Right? So
they're really out there directing traffic with their pistol. Like,
dude, there's been all kinds of stories, right? So you can't make this stuff up. I wish I could remember all of them, right? Where's it going with it? Yeah, so generally, guys start with a handheld light, and what you start with is what you end with, right? So because of human anatomy, a thing called inner limb coordination, under stress, under start a response, guys will clinch onto what they're holding, like, oh fuck, right? So they'll clinch onto that, and then once they have time and to really process what's going on, they solve the problem, right? You name it, they let go or they don't let go, but they're like, oh shit, like, I had my phone in my hand. Right? Oh shit, I had my radio in my hand this whole entire time, or I had my taser. I had a pen in my hand while I was shooting, right? I had a clipboard in my hand, you name it, right? So that just applies to every human being across the board, right? So from a patrol-based aspect to my regular Joes carrying off duty, my concealed carry guys, right? Maybe you haven't practiced a lot of one-handed shooting, but you should, because in the off chance that when you get into some type of encounter, it may not always start initially as a gunfight, but something happened, right? You got into a fight, you're doing jits on the ground, whatever's going on, right? Or you got startled and you held onto your phone or your keys, or your groceries or whatever it may be, right? So,
right.
Or maybe it's your handheld light, right? Who knows? But that's the thing, right? So I shoot obviously a lot of one-handed shooting because I do a lot of low light applications. But then also because matches, right? I know they do a lot of single-handed shooting stuff as well. So definitely don't want to suck up at. So, a lot of people don't want to practice what they're not good at. But it just makes you better, man, right? You don't have to hit it every range session, but at least do it every other range session, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Dry fire.
Yes. Yeah, dry fire is probably where people, like all shooting, where people are going to see the biggest gain is something that they really, really suck at when it comes to the mechanics of anything. Like a lot of people, probably the biggest thing I see, other than recoil management, is finding their dot or finding their sights on the presentation. Like that's 100% fixable in dry fire in like a week, right? If you hammered out single hand only stuff for a week, presentations, finding your dot on the draw or on a presentation, I mean, I don't know anybody who's not going to get significantly better from that in 5 days, 7 days of just working that dry, finding that dot. So yeah, it's just
like
it's easy.
10 minutes, right? 100%. It doesn't have to be like I used to. I'm sure you guys are the same. I used to fall into not the trap, but for lack of better words, like I would dry fire for like an hour, 2 hours, right? And then when I first started, right, like it's like, oh man, like I put in a lot of work. Right. But then now I'm like, I put in like 10, 15 minutes and I'm kind of like fucking smoked after that. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
that just tells me like my dry fire when I first started wasn't really what I thought it was. Right. So, and it obviously depends what you're doing. Right. As far as dry fire, am I working on my grip, my vision? Am I working on transitions? And here's another thing, right? The biggest thing that I see within a low light, especially application wise, is guys that don't have a lot of low light training is they'll generally grab the handheld light out and then let's say on the target and then the handheld light will be pointed up here somewhere, right? Like the silhouette in the sky, like here we are down here, guys, like SOS, right? Like, so that's kind of the biggest issue that I see is guys just don't have a lot of hand-eye coordination of presenting the handheld light onto target, right? And so they'll be off to the left, off to the right, up high, something like that. And you can fix that by dry firing. Right?
Yeah, right.
You can dry fire the handheld light presentation onto a target, whatever you want. And if you're like, oh man, like my handheld light's gonna hit the white wall and it's gonna blind me. I'm like, bro, like you're dry firing, and if that's an issue, put it on low mode, or get a laser, buy your little cheap laser, right? A little kind of handheld laser, right? And then just get reps of putting that laser on the target over
Yeah.
and over and over, right? So guys that play sports, guys that play video games, they have a lot of hand-eye coordination. So those guys do better versus guys who just didn't play a lot of sports, right? Who just don't have a lot of time really kind of getting those reps of hand-eye coordination. So things you can do: dry fire with a laser, with your handheld light. That's gonna pay dividends for sure.
So Brian, you already kind of touched on it, but I'm just going to ask you right off the bat. So can a weapon light or a handheld light be too bright?
No, not in my opinion. So whether I'm doing structure work, I'm outside a structure, around vehicles, you name it, I want as many lumens as possible, right? So the more lumens I have, the more information I can gather, which allows my brain to process information faster, right? So if I could put the sun in my handheld light or my weapon light, which I'm sure you've heard, I'd like to do that. We're not there yet. I'm just waiting for Modlight to hurry up and step up their game. Right? We're working on it, right? So I want as many lumens as I can. That lumen number, there's no exact number. The higher, the better, right? Now, it's a fine balance between lumens and candela. Lumens is simply a total measurement amount of light, whereas candela is the measurement of the intensity of the light at distance and so forth, right? So just in a layman's terms, right? And so I want both of those, right? So it's a fine balance between them. But I want a light that is capable to give me enough PID at distance. That distance, depending on what that light is on a rifle or a handgun or just a handheld light. So, right, that's going to be up to you on distance. That's going to give me a lot of secondary information from the flood and the spill, and then a lot of primary information off the hotspot, right? So generally want the hotspot on target. We generally tell guys in class, hey, I want hotspot on high thoracic of the target or the person themselves, so I can put that hotspot on the face. So if I do that, it allows them to take away their ability to see, especially when it's completely dark outside, right? Trying to fight through that stuff is pretty hard, depending on distance. So I want as many lumens as possible, so I can process information as quickly as possible, right? So
Sure.
Whether that's in a structure or not, it doesn't matter. I've never tailored or I've never carried a 250 lumen light because on a certain platform because I'm going to be doing a lot of structure work with it. No, it just comes down to techniques, right? So if I can present the handgun, handle light, whatever, straight line, center line where I'm looking, great. If I can't because the environment is giving me a lot of spill back off the wall, the mirror, whatever, then if the opportunity arises, then I can broadcast the light up, right? So umbrella lighting to spill that light up and it'll spill down, or floorboard lighting, right? Where I'm broadcasting light down and it'll flood up. Now that's very dependent on the environment, right? You can't always get away with that because let's say I'm in a warehouse where it's like, I don't know, 20 feet, right? Like, so I'm not going to get a lot of spill back off of that, right? So maybe floorboard or keeping that light center, right? But here's the thing, like, I'm not going to keep that light completely on a mirror the whole entire time or completely on a white wall and just like blinding myself, right? Like, you're going to be fine. Like, you'll just pass through it for like a second, right? You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
And as long as you leave your light on, right, you're not going to you're not going to be blind, right? Because yes, if I go light on, light off, I start to bleach my eyes. Right? There's a chemical within the eyes called rhodopsin. So when I do that, it kind of restarts the whole process. And then so the more times I do light on, light off, I'm bleaching my eyes, right? So essentially, I kind of make myself legally blind over and over if I'm going light on, light off, right? So not a fan of that. Now it has its applications, but patrol-based guys like light on, they already know we're there, right? I need to be able to see, right? So I'm not walking around blind. Yeah. So that's my sense on it, man.
Yeah, I worked at a place for the last couple of years that had a really nice action target simunition shoot house, and the walls were just like perfectly white, right? And so everything's white in there. And for the most part, a lot of the runs that we would have students doing, especially at the beginning, were very sterile. So no furniture, no nothing. It's just an empty room, white walls. Justin's been in that shoot house, concrete floor, white walls, and it's kind of in a warehouse type room, right, where the ceiling's very tall. OKW on a like an 11.5 AR, right? No issues, right? Like, yeah, it was never like, oh my gosh, that's too bright. I lost view of the target. It was never anything like that. And then from my experience doing stuff in like normal houses, there's a lot of things inside the house that soak up light, right? Like your couch isn't bouncing light back off of you. Carpet doesn't do that. Even different kinds of paint or whatever people have hanging on their walls, like that stuff all tends to absorb light versus like bouncing straight off. Like you're saying, it's not like you're just shining at a whiteboard or a mirror the whole time. I think that's maybe something that people just kind of overplay a little bit, but
yeah, I think it was also very legacy doctrine or legacy thinking, when that was kind of coming out, like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, whenever that was, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Kind of maybe one of our last questions, and then I do want to get into a couple listener questions if we have a few minutes here. So, what are some of the biggest roadblocks you see with students taking your low light courses? Just kind of across the board, maybe one or two things that it's like, yeah, I see this frequently coming up, and this can be for your LE guys or for your civilian guys.
Yeah, so it applies to both, right? So like I mentioned earlier, the handheld light on target is generally kind of the number one issue, right? So if you're going to take a low light class with me or whoever it is, right, and you're kind of like, I don't do a lot of handheld light stuff, be ready when you come to at least my class, right? You're going to do a lot of handheld light stuff, whether that's with a handgun or a rifle.
Can't confirm.
Right, yeah, exactly. Because, dude, here's the thing. Weapon light on a handgun or a rifle, easy, right? It's a piece of cake. Like, turn that thing on, you got your best two-handed grip possible, right? Like, you're fine, right? But when it's like one hand on the gun and one hand on the light, you're like, oh man, whether it's rifle or handgun, that's gonna kind of really show you where you are within your skill set, right? And it just give you something to work on, because it's easy. Everybody does live fire, dry fire with two hands on the gun, weapon monolight, etc. That's easy, right? Practice what you're not good at, right? That's kind of how I got better at stuff. So dry fire, right? Go to the range if you can. The handheld light on target as much as possible. Things that will help. Obviously, you can do it at home. You can do it with a laser, target, whatever you want. If you're at the range doing it, and you're kind of waiting for low light setting conditions, let's say maybe you can't do low light at the range. If you're running a powerful enough handheld light at a certain distance, 7 yards from the target, what I'll do is I'll put a black spray paint on the target, on the center, right at the chest and A-zone, and then I'll also put a high-vis reflective tape right above it. So that way during daytime, at least when I run my handheld light on it, it'll kind of give me some refraction right off of the tape itself.
Yes.
Or the spray paint. Sometimes the spray paint will do it, but the high-vis tape for sure will do that, right? So you can do that. Now it also depends on the day, right? Sometimes on like when it's a fully bright day, which most of the time they are, right?
Especially down in Texas.
Yeah, it doesn't always work, but it may help you out, right? So try that out if you want to do that for your own practice, guys, during your live fire sessions if you're waiting for low light conditions. So that works. So handheld light on target, and then handheld light placement. whether that's on a belt setup or whether that's concealed. For my concealed guys, it's generally not an issue because generally most guys are going to run on the support side. So I'm a right-handed shooter, so obviously mags are going to be on the left side of the body. So same thing with a handheld light should be on the left side of the body, whether that's the back left pocket, right, or the front pocket on the left side. I've seen some guys run a handheld light on the dominant side, right, which is kind of weird. So trying to reach across my body for a handheld light is weird. So I should keep that handheld light on the support side. Just like if I was doing a reload, it's the same thing with a handheld light, right? So I wear it in my front pocket right here. So if I need the handheld light, right, it kind of mimics, or I have commonality between a reload or fetching my handheld light. So I have that kind of same motion, if we will, right? So for my concealed guys, that's pretty easy. But the same thing for my patrol guys. I'll see patrol guys carry their handheld lights on the opposite side of the body for whatever reason, right? So I don't know why. Please don't do that. Keep it on the support side. So a little bit of a gear issue there, right?
Sure.
And then what else?
If you're running a belt and a plate carrier, which I know, based on a lot of your photos and things, you tend to run both most of the time.
Yeah.
Where do you prefer to run that kind of on the duty gear? Is that up on the PC or is that down on the belt?
So it's most of the time on my belt, right? So I just have a lot of reps of it on my belt, and I'm not always running my plate carrier. So again, I just try to keep it calm and across the board. So when I run my plate carrier, great. If I don't have it, then obviously I have my first line belt on. It's always on the same spot. So two mags, right? Two mags, handheld light, raffle mag, radio, whatever I'm running, right? But I keep that set up pretty much the same. So that's what I run that way on my plate carrier. I'm running defense mechanisms plate carrier, and it has just a side pouch for it. So I just run it right here on the left side as well, right? So just support side. So keep that pretty common again. So handheld light on target, handheld light placement on body or on kit, and then what else? And then obviously one-handed shooting. That's going to be the biggest thing, right? Because handheld light, handgun, so it's a lot of one-handed shooting. So, like at 7 yards, guys will keep them alphas. And once we start pushing distance, like 15, 25, and we do a lot of distance shooting in the class, right? We'll start you off relatively close-ish, 7 yards. That's kind of the closest that we go to. And then we push distance, near targets to medium to far targets, steel, right, etc. Just depends on the range. So if you're not happy with your performance, that just tells you have work to do. And that's good, right? Like you're not always going to be a winner. That's for sure.
So when you're using your handheld light, what technique do you prefer? Do you prefer Harry's or
all of them, baby?
Okay.
Yeah. So
time and a place.
Yeah, there's a time and a place, right? So I generally show 3. There's quite a bit more than that, right? So I'll show the FBI technique, right? I'll show a tempo index or chin index, whichever, right? Kind of keep those as the same one, even though they're kind of not, right? So you could count that as maybe 2 and 3 if you want. So FBI, a tempo index or a chin index, and then a Harry's position, right? So the Harry's position. So I show those 3 or 4, however you want to count it. And then that's it, right? So you'll notice, and I talk about it in class a lot, is I'm not a fan of having to change my grip, right? So I'm not a fan of changing my grip on handheld lights. So when I go to an FBI, it doesn't change. If I go to tempo index, it doesn't change. If I go to chin index, it doesn't change. If I go to a Harry's position, the only thing that changes is how I meet or mount the hands, right? But the grip itself of how I hold the light doesn't change. So you never see me do this, right? You never see me have to do a syringe grip. You never see me have to do just anything with a handheld light because of human anatomy and inner limb coordination, right? So can we get guys to switch up? Can we get guys to hold the light in different ways? For sure. But we need time and we need money, right? If I only have guys for 4 hours for low light training, right? And maybe 2 of that is kind of a pre-workup, and then maybe you only get 2 hours of actual low light training, right? So I'm not about to waste a lot of time showing them 10 different ways of how to hold a handheld light. I'm just going to show them one way to hold it and a couple of different applications of how to apply it to the environment. So an FBI position works really well around a vehicle, inside a structure, right? If, let's say, I'm not so good at presenting the handheld light out here and then trying to shoot one-handed, right? Because that's kind of 2 systems that I'm trying to work with, right? The closer I bring the handheld light towards my body, what you'll generally see is guys shoot a little bit better and they'll shoot a little bit more accurate, right? Because now everything's kind of coming center line, everything's kind of getting tighter. So you'll see guys shoot better this way or even this way compared to the FBI position because I have two free floating objects out here, right? So those are the techniques that I showed you. So if you wanted to come to a low light class, there you go.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay. Justin, you have anything else, or can we jump into some listener submitted questions?
No, go for it.
Cool. All right. So I think we can maybe bust through quite a few of these because I think we've talked about some of this stuff already. One of the questions we got a number of times, do you use primarily momentary or constant on? You already kind of said that constant on is pretty much the go-to there, right? For the reasons that we already talked about, the light kind of flickering on and off, things like that.
Yeah, whether I'm handheld light or whip mount light, it's generally constant on. Now, again, big fan of a tail cap that can do both. So sometimes I just push down on the gas pedal, if you will. And it's not fully activated, but it's kind of almost there. It depends on the tail cap itself. But like when I'm light on target, yeah, it's a constant on, whether that's a full click in or it's like a almost fully clicked in, if you will, right? So it's constant on generally. Do what I need to do with the light and then turn it off, right? So generally there's 5 applications when we need light. So that's searching, that's navigation, right? That's communication. Then it's control, and then it's PID. So if I'm doing any of those 5 things with a handheld light or whip mount light, then the light's on. If I'm not doing any of those 5 things, then turn that thing off and do whatever you're doing, right? So just be smart with it, right? So, yeah, there you go.
Cool. I dig it. Another question. So if strobe isn't necessary, why are they built into lights so often?
Oh man, I think it just comes down to a feature that people may have thought they wanted or really liked, right? Somebody thought it was cool to have a strobe effect. But I haven't seen any OS. I'm sure they're out there where guys are intentionally using strobe. It's probably an accidental thing. But the strobe effect gives us buffered information. So if you think of a comic book or somebody writing out a story, right? It's kind of page by page or sketch by sketch. And when you do the story, right, on the pages, you kind of see it in kind of buffered information.
Yep.
So a strobe gives you that buffer information depending on distance, your eyes, and so forth. So why do that to ourselves? Why not just turn the thing on, right?
Right.
And be done with it. So
it almost looks like one of those old, like really, really old, like very first movies that they made, right? Where it's like just chung 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 chung, and it's a bunch of like the Charlie Chaplin stuff, right? Like that's
like
what that's
picture.
That's what it looks like, 100%. Because I think a lot of people maybe they think it's good, like you were saying. They turn it on. What they don't realize is it works against them as well, right?
Yeah, so it's definitely disorientating for the suspect or whatever.
Certainly,
but also for you as well, right? Because you're like, you may not be directly on the receiving end, but you're still getting that buffered information, if you will.
Yeah, right.
You want to know what else is disorienting?
What's that?
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, that's pretty disorienting too.
Mara Dobson.
This is true. Another question we got was, what is rhodopsin?
So again, rhodopsin is just a light-sensitive chemical or protein within the eyes, right? So there's rhodopsin, and then like once light hits it, essentially becomes bleached, right? So there's a whole like anatomy, kind of like small anatomy that we do within the class, but that's kind of a layman's definition of it, right? So rhodopsin is important, right? Because it's a light-sensitive protein within the eye. We want as much of that as possible. Generally, we don't see well during the dark, right? So we want to preserve that as much as we can. Once I start doing light on, light off, or I get light, right? My eyes are exposed to light. It becomes a bleach, so I lose that rhodopsin, right? So I want to have that as much as possible. To regain that, to get my eyes fully saturated with rhodopsin, can take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes or longer, depending on age, right? And various things you smoke, drink, you name it, right? So
sure,
I want to keep as much of that protein or that chemical within the eye as best as possible. All right, so that's rhodopsin in a nutshell, if you will. Right. That's cool. We dive deeper into it in the class. It's good for guys to know. There are some guys who care. There are some guys who are like, oh, bro. But it's not crazy, really. Like, we're in class like maybe 35 minutes or 45 minutes. So yeah.
Cool. Let's see. I want to get through some of these really quick here. So one guy said, wow, he sent this in 3 parts.
Oh, babe.
Wow. Okay. So this might not make a lot of sense to me, but I'm kind of retarded. So is having enough light to spot a threat the same as having enough light to get through the fight? Meaning I have enough light in a building to see a gun in someone's hand, but not enough light to get through the fight depending on the situation. So I think I know what he's saying is like, I think we maybe talked about it already with, is a light too bright for the situation? I think the answer there may be going brighter is better, right?
Yeah, going brighter is better, right? So I'll give you a stat from my from the LE perspective, right? So
okay,
over so low light conditions right now, that's not like was that completely dark? Was it kind of a mesopic environment, right, where it's kind of like ambient, it's kind of like dusk and so forth. But low light conditions contributed to 75% of mistake of fact shootings. For those that don't know, mistake of fact shooting simply means is we shot somebody who did not deserve to be shot, right? Because we thought, law enforcement, or we thought that they had a gun in their hand, but it was a wallet. It was a phone, right? It was keys. It was a lighter in their hand, but they thought it was a knife. You name it, right? So, what does that tell you?
That in the majority of these shootings, there's not enough information being provided.
Right. So our eyes are designed to work best when it's daylight, right? So bro, like I want as much lumens as much as I can get, right? So,
yep.
So I don't think that necessarily answers the question, but I would hate to fall into the category of falling into a mistake of fact shooting because I thought it was a wallet, right? And there's tons of videos. I could show videos, and I show videos in class of guys doing that, right? Like the guy was just presenting a wallet, like he wasn't even acting in any type of his demeanor wasn't aggressive. He was complying to what the officer was saying, right? And the officer still shot him because he thought it was a gun, like, right? Yikes. So, yeah, right. So we need as much lumens as possible. So, yes, you can PID a person at whatever distance that is with whatever light you're running, and you may think it is a weapon or not, right? But why even kind of put yourself in that potential risk, right? Just run as many lumens as you can, homie. I don't know how to say it. Yeah.
I agree with that. Certainly. And I think you mentioned this before, your context can change super fast, right? So if you're in a perfectly dark room and you turn on your iPhone light or even just turn on your phone screen, like that can give you plenty of light to navigate the room or find something. I mean, we've all probably done it. We walk in to the bedroom, the wife's asleep, the lights are off. We turn on our phone. We're trying to find, our phone charger or whatever it is, right? And it's plenty of light to navigate. We can see things, but certainly that's not going to be enough light to light someone up who's 20 yards away in some shadows in a parking lot, something like that. I mean, that phone light's not going to do anything. So I think to answer maybe his question, having enough light to spot the threat the same as having enough light to get through the fight, I don't think so. It's going to depend on the context. All the lumens.
And you'll also see that with guys coming to class and actually working through 3D visual bearers. So you can get away with it. You can get away with it on a Blue Barrel. You can get away with it on a VTEC. But when you start applying vehicles on the range or structures and so forth that kind of give you a 3D dimensional aspect, guys that are running, let's say, I can't think of anything, not to like bash any brands, but like those very subcompact weapon model lights that have a lot of flood, right, and a lot of spill, but not even a hot spot. They'll do fine at 7, maybe 10 yards. They can see the target, but targets that are beyond that, even at 25, they're like, dude, I can't see it. Or what they're having a problem with is fighting through smoke, right, or carbon buildup, because maybe they're the 10th guy on the line, right, while guys are going down. So now there's a lot of like smoke or fog, or they're just laying down on the deck and they're trying to fight through some semi-tall grass, and then all that light is getting eaten up by the environment itself, right? So think about that as well when you looking to purchase a weapon-mounted light, right? Like, is it going to be powerful enough, or the hotspot, is it powerful enough to help me push through those photonic barriers, right? So if a photon is simply an element amount of light we generally can't see that, right? So and then a photonic barrier is anything that interacts with that light from doing work. So that could be light on light. So I'm fighting into somebody else's light. I'm fighting against I'm fighting against a window tint, right? So a super dark window tint. I'm fighting from a daylight setting into a dark setting, right? There's a lot of examples of that within LE. Am I trying to push through some grass, carbon, smoke, you name it, right? So if I can't push through it, I'm gonna have to change my elevation, go above it, go below it, go around it, you name it, right? So those are all considerations for a weapon-mounted light and handheld light, really, to be honest.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And that was another question we had about gas from the gun kind of blocking your view. I think you just answered that perfectly. Like, listen, if you can't see the target's obscured by something in your environment, which could be the gas coming out of your gun. Get yourself to a more advantageous position where you can see, right? Yeah. That is definitely something that I've run across before shooting. Justin, you and I were doing something a few months ago where we were shooting maybe 40, 50 yards with a handgun, which is stretching it for sure, right? But we have lights on our guns that can reach that far very, very easily. And that was the thing we were running into right away, was all this gas and smoke from the guns obscures the target in maybe 2 or 3 shots, right? Yep. And so we were kind of standing static and like, well, I don't really know what to do, and just kind of pushing through. And the powerful light helps a little bit, but I mean, probably one of the easiest things we could have done was just sidestepped 1 or 2 steps. The target comes back in view, re-engage the target, right? Does it work great for the timed drill? Like, probably not, right? But it's one of those things that you definitely have to work through. So very cool. And another question was, what do I do? I find myself blinded by someone else's light. Like you said, I think the more powerful the light you have, the easier it's going to push through an opposing light source. Certainly I found like candela to be very helpful for that. The brighter and tighter the hot spot, the easier it is to push past and see what's behind that light, right? Anything else you would add to that one? The kind of getting blinded, getting the light treatment yourself. Yeah. So obviously having a good light, like you said, that can help me potentially push through it as best as possible. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. It just depends what you're fighting. But if I'm directly fighting into the source of the light, if I have the time and the ability to do so, you're gonna have to change the angle, right? Just like trying to push through smoke or carbon, right? Above, below, around, I'm gonna have to change the angle so I'm not directly being front-lit by the light. Now that's easier said than done, especially if you're fighting a worthy opposition, because like that dude's using light, he's not just gonna leave the light on that one spot and then like let you move, right? So it's kind of a give and take, but you do your best to change the angle as best as possible. If it's a static light, not a problem, right? But if it's a organic light that's moving, right, because it's attached to a weapon system with a person, then that's a different story, right? You do your best within that as best as you can, right? Yep. Yeah. Cool. Let me see if there's anything else worth pulling up here. I do appreciate people jumping on Instagram and sending some questions in for Bryan. So the homie Matt Adams, he said, do you teach the light in the mouth technique? Asking for a friend.
That's after class, bro.
That's after class. Yeah, it's dark out. It's nice. All right. I think that about wraps it up for kind of the topic of the day here, unless you have anything else you would like to bring up, Bryan or Justin.
Yeah, so I've got one. So
Sure.
I want Bryan to bust the probably one of the biggest myths
Oh man.
that I hear or have heard. I would say it's pretty uncommon within like our circles, the training community, but more so common with like your average concealed carry person, your average gun owner. The myth being, or the question being, I don't want to have a weapon light on my gun because it gives my position away. What would you say to that?
So here's the thing, right? So generally, whether it's a LE perspective or a concealed carry perspective, they generally already know where we are, right? We already started the engagement, or we're about to start the engagement, or the fight's already on because it started DT, right? So a DT situation, and then it evolved into a gunfight. They already know we're there. It doesn't matter, right? So I don't think there's any documented cases. There may be only one where a person was shooting at the light because they thought it was what was it? It was a couple years ago. It was an officer responding to an alarm at a residence. The homeowner shot the officer, right, because he was shooting at the light because he thought it was a burglary or whatever. All right, so home invasion. But other than that, I think that was kind of the only documented case of where somebody was shooting at the light. Now, does that happen? It kind of happened for sure, right? But that comes down to the skill level of the opposition and so forth. General fucking shitbags are generally not shooting at the light, but it does happen, right? But I wouldn't let that dictate or stop me from carrying a weapon on a light, right? Because at the end of the day, suspects don't play by our rules, right? So, meaning, let's say I had that weapon on a light on, and then I turn it off, right? Suspect, right? Opposition is never going to be like, oh shit, he turned the light off. Like I can't shoot him. You know what I mean? I can only shoot at what I can see. Oh shit, there's a light. Okay, now I can shoot him. Oh shit, he turned it off again. No, right? They just send hate in our general direction. So it doesn't even matter, bro. Like so, I tell guys all the time, like, don't let that stop you from carrying a weapon on a light because it is a very, very low percentage, right? So. Yeah, it definitely can. You definitely could fall on that. Maybe let's say 1-2%, but look at the majority of the scale. Like I'm gonna carry a weapon on the light. Yeah. So I definitely say it's a myth. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just from my personal limited experience, albeit, Brendan, some of the shoot house stuff we had done, last year, it was really interesting for me. I remember there was one scenario we did for a class that we did, and where I actually came into a room and you already had your Modlight shining right at me. And I will never forget, that was one of the first times that I was like jacked up, like kind of on adrenaline. I go into a room not expecting, like I expected you to be, doing something else. And I opened the door to you shining light in my face, a Modlight right in my face. And I literally, it was like I was looking at the sun. I'm not kidding you. This is literally what I saw. And
I saw the light, baby.
Yeah. And that was such, and I already kind of believed this already, but that was such like a nail in the coffin for me to believe that myth is just not the way like it works in real world from my experience, is that when you have really high powered lights, and maybe it's the case with like a little iPhone light, right? Like you see something a little in the darkness and you're like, what is that? But when you have like these high performance lights, like Modlights, Surefires, whatever it may be, what you're seeing, what you're intaking in your eyes is so powerful that that idea just kind of gets thrown out the window. Like you're not able to look through it and be like, I see where he's not now. I'm going to shoot in that direction. You're like, your immediate response is, oh my gosh, that's so bright. You close your eyes, you cover your eyes, you look away, whatever it may be. So,
and as I remember with that scenario too, I believe the lights weren't all the way off. So there was ambient light. And I think I was maybe kneeling or crouched in the middle of the room, shining the light right at the door when you walked in, right? And so there was actually enough light, ambient light. If there had been no flashlights involved, you would have been able to see me, identify what I was holding in my hands, all of that very easily. But even in that ambient light situation, I mean, the light completely distracted you, and it certainly would have given me enough time to put rounds on target if I had wanted to. I don't think that was the scenario at the time, but yeah, it's definitely it's very eye opening.
It's extremely
some pun intended. Maybe eye closing.
Eye closing, yeah.
Yeah, to be put in that situation for the first time, certainly. So
yeah, I would recommend. And this is something you can do, especially if you have like airsoft guns. Something I recommend to like anyone I ever talk to about the subject is literally just like go in a house at night with a couple of your buddies and just play like hide and seek with handheld lights and like surprise each other, try and find each other, and like literally shine these in each other's faces as you go into rooms. Or if you have if you have like airsoft guns, it doesn't need to be like this crazy CQB scenario. Just literally go and try shining lights at each other and try to like shoot at each other, just like match style, right? Like it doesn't have to be structured, just to see like what it's like to have, you know, some gangster dude just shine a super high powered light at your face. And it's like that, it'll answer a lot of the questions that you have, I think.
Certainly. Okay. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for coming on, contributing to the discussion. I think this was very beneficial. I definitely got a lot out of it. I think everybody who's going to watch this is going to as well. Really enjoy chatting with you. As always, looking forward to sharing the line with you again one of these days. Hopefully we can, Justin and I can get down to one of your classes here. I think that would be a hoot. Before we go, let folks know how they can keep up with you, sign up for training classes, that type of thing, how they can support you.
Yeah, man. So you can find me on Instagram, right? Slytac Training. Same handle for the website, slytactraining.com. Facebook's the same, pretty much all the same. YouTube. Not heavily on YouTube yet. I only have so much time. I'm gonna try to do a lot more YouTube stuff for sure. I'm trying to kind of follow the same path you guys are doing, right? But you can get a hold of me really easy on IG, right? I'm very active on there, so you can DM me if you have messages or questions, or you can email me, right? But yeah, I would say IG is probably easiest, unless you want to email me directly. So yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, man.
Very cool. All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Gateway Defense Podcast. If you like this content, please do us a favor by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Follow us over on Instagram, keep up with the daily stuff. And of course, if you're looking to train with us, be sure to check out our website, gateway-defense.com. You can also purchase merch there, and that's a great way to find us and support us. In addition, if you'd like to host us for a class in your area, we're going to be traveling the country, just much the same as Bryan is going to be for the 2024 calendar year. So be sure to check out our hosting section on the website as well. Figure out how you can get a free class. Thanks for listening to the Gateway Defense Podcast. And until next time, keep practicing and shooting, and we'll see you on the range.